evening, everyone. Members of the board, are we ready to start our meeting? I'd like to call to order the 904th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as AlexRenew Enterprises. And the first meeting with our new CEO, Mr. Carl. Congratulations. Thank you. Good to see you in that seat. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Dix, second by Mr. Dix. All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public? Traffic again, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay, if everybody could take a quick look at the consent agenda, minutes from our meeting on January 17th. Give you a minute. Changes, modifications. Motion approved. Moved by Mr. Beal. Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dickinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving very rapidly to new business. Mr. Carl, do you want to kick off this important discussion of rate history?
So thank you, Mr. Hill. I just want to also note that we're joined tonight by Mr. Bovary, Mr. Ori from Rath Palace, our financial consultant. If there's any detailed questions, we can certainly defer to them to help answer those questions. They've been supporting us since 2005, and you'll see some slides tonight, the presentation that date back to that time too. So, really wanted to start off. We're in a rate setting year for AlexRenew, so we wanted to start off and get everybody on the same page around our history of rate setting and also our financial principles. So this evening's presentation, we're going to start out talking about our vision and values because they're intertwined with how we set our fiscal policies and how we look at rates and budget on a year-to-year basis. Talk about our assets and who we serve, walk through our policies and covenants, go through some of the decisions that were made back in 2019 when we took over AlexRenew on how we were going to set rates and structure rates for the AlexRenew program. We'll give a brief overview of where we stand with respect to the rate adjustments on AlexRenew, and then talk about next steps in our budget planning process for FY 2024. So starting out, our vision at AlexRenew is intertwined with our CIP planning process, how we determine rates and how we communicate with the public. In addition to that, we also have our strategic outcomes that help set our organizational objectives on how we proceed with our year-to-year work, as well as our budget. We've seen these from time to time. I'm not going to go through these in detail. AlexRenew, as an entity, we manage 13 billion gallons of wastewater annually at our wastewater treatment plant here in the Southwest Quadrant. We serve 300,000 customers. We're an independent political subdivision that currently investing about $50 million annually for the health of the Chesapeake Bay. We're governed by a 5-member citizen board, and we manage over $1 billion in assets. I'm going to touch on the assets on the next slide. So a few important things to note on this slide. We're showing our service area as well as our existing assets. The service area is shown in light green. You can see that the service area extends outside of the city of Alexandria limits, which are outlined in purple. The very light green area is our CSO area, we're dedicating AlexRenew to that project. And then this blue area is the portion of the city that flows to Arlington. This is important to note, and distinguishing these areas is because we have service agreements that govern how we operate with respect to Fairfax, the city of Alexandria, as well as Arlington. In addition to that, this slide also shows our assets, our 4 main interceptors, as well as our 5 pumping stations, one of which is under construction to support the Virginia Tech campus. The last piece shown here is the wharf, as well as the outfalls and the service chambers along the Holmes Ranch Run. That's the assets that are valued about over $1.2 billion. So as we noted, we treat about 13 billion gallons of wastewater each year, and that comes from residential single-family homes, commercial classes that include multifamily units, as well as industrial units. Alexandria does not have a lot of industrial users, but that's where we classify our schools, government agencies, and things like that. It's important to note that if you look at this slide, a lot of our flows that are billed annually, the first 3 numbers from residential, single family, commercial, and industrial, those are based on water meter records from Virginia American Water, and they're in kilogallons per year. You'll note that based on those water records, our largest users are commercial units. About 3.2 million kilogallons per year come from our commercial units. And if you look at that, the actual customer value is only around 3,500. You'll note the difference between that number and our residential single-family home numbers as well. It's flip-flop. We have a large amount of single-family home accounts, but not a significant amount of flow compared to the commercial units.
Can you give an example of a commercial unit that would fall in this category?
The building across the street, multifamily building. There's large buildings like the building across the street, and there's smaller ones where we have 1 master meter, but multiple people living in the unit.
Where would condos fall? Which category?
Commercial.
National Science Foundation, Patent Office, commercial.
I believe, yes, correct. And then the other piece, the last number shown Fairfax County is treated as a wholesale customer. That number is actually based on metered flows, wastewater flows. It's different than the numbers above, which are based on flows that we get from Virginia American Water. You'll note that the numbers, if you sit here and try to do the math, it's not going to add up to 13 billion gallons a year. That's because it does not include rainwater, stormwater that gets into our system through the CSO. So you'll see a difference when you add those numbers up between by about 2 to 3 million gallons per billion gallons. Per year. Yeah, this is an annual number.
Okay.
On the right. They're an annual number, and if the title says 13 billion gallons a year, when you try to add those numbers up, you'll see they don't reach 13, they reach about 10.
Before you go too far, you indicated on the prior slide, you accounted $50 million to just pay. How did you determine that?
So we took our CIP over 10 years and averaged it to come up with that number. And that large number, 50 million, includes the AlexRenew spend. We did that calculation 2 years ago, and it included most of the AlexRenew construction spend to come up with 50 million and spread that over 2 years. Good. So one of the first things we wanted to talk about tonight is the Master Indenture of Trust, which is one of our fiscal policies that represents our legal covenant between AlexRenew and our bondholders. I'm not going to go through this slide in terrible detail, but we wanted to focus on a few things. The Master Indenture of Trust, we'll talk a little bit about minimum cash reserves. It does identify the minimum cash reserve of 1.1. And it also defines what we call the flow of funds. So how funds come into AlexRenew, whether it be for grants or loans, how those funds flow within the organization. So what happens in the Master Indenture Trust outlines the flow of funds. Funds initially come into AlexRenew, and they go into a revenue fund, and then they get transferred out of those funds into the other funds you see here on the screen. They go from revenue fund to operating fund, and that helps pay our operating expenses. From there, we go into the bond fund and help pay our debt service. In addition to that, any required transfers to the debt service would then go into the debt service reserve fund, then into the joint IRR fund to meet our joint IRR work per the Fairfax agreement. It's important to note that for the joint IRR, Fairfax contributes 0.7% of our assets each year to that fund, and that helps fund our maintenance, replacement of valves, pumps, things like that that need to be renewed on an annual basis. After the joint IRR fund, money is transferred to the general IRR fund, which focuses on Alex only, city only needs, and then from there it flows down into the general fund. So each year we put together an annual budget, and we structure our annual budget in three main categories. We have O&M, that is for the operation of our utility, routine maintenance, and what we do on a daily basis to achieve our mission. The IRR budget, which includes a Fairfax piece as well as an Alex only piece, is really, these are smaller projects that are meant to renew or replace an existing asset, unit process, or facility. That differs from a capital improvement budget on the right, which are much larger non-recurring projects where we add a new asset or replace unit processes wholesale. The way to kind of think about IRR and CIP is in an IRR project, it might be a pump replacement or a valve replacement, something with a relatively shorter service life. When we're doing major capital projects, we're investing in a project like AlexRenew, that project's going to have a 100-year service life, and it is a brand new asset that AlexRenew is bringing into its portfolio. So mentioning the Master Indenture of Trust, AlexRenew also adopted a financial policy in 2010 that we revisited again in 2021 and was endorsed by the board that same year. And when we look at our financial policy, we look at four main areas, which are summarized here. Debt service coverage, as I mentioned, 1.1 in the Master Indenture of Trust. The financial policy looked at a minimum of 1.5. Minimum reserves are 120 days of operating expenses. Budget, we do a 10-year capital improvement plan, as well as a minimum of 3-year budget. And in addition to that, we have a pay-go requirement, which is our cash, to fund a minimum of 15% of our 10-year CIP from cash. And it's important to note that all of these funds, especially debt service and pay-go, are related when we talk about the flow of funds. And our metrics. So mentioning the agreements on the assets slide, we want to take a few moments and walk through what our 3 service agreements say that support our budget, because it determines how we receive funds and how we spend funds. So we'll start vertically and walk down. Fairfax County, we had an initial service agreement in 1973. That agreement was updated in 1998. And from a capacity standpoint, Fairfax County has 60% capacity allocated at the plant. That equates to 32.4 MGD. The other 40% are allocated to the city. From a billing standpoint, Fairfax pays AlexRenew for wholesale wastewater treatment services based on the metered flows into the work. Operating expenses are shared similarly, and then capital costs are based on our service agreement, and then we have a separate project-specific agreement, like the agreement we have for the AlexRenew system for sharing costs for capital projects. Arlington County, the original date was 1977. We last amended in 1994. We are actively working with the county to update our service agreement. And that covers 3 MGD of flow from the city to Arlington County's water pollution control plant. We typically don't hit 3 MGD. We're somewhere around 1.7 MGD, 1.6, 1.7 MGD.
So why does it need to be reworked?
The county is reworking their agreements with all of the jurisdictions.
Or what's likely to change?
And we just got the draft today.
Oh,
So I'm not sure.
Would you see us advocating paying for less than 3 MGD?
The change of the agreement was more structural than it was changing the basis of the agreement that was set in 1977.
That's what they want.
That's what they want. So we need to dig into it. It came into legal today. I'm gonna take a look at it and determine the next step. So we pay wholesale services based on bill flows to Arlington. Well, we're paying for that, the bill flows on an annual basis to Arlington, just like Fairfax pays AlexRenew. It's the actual flows.
do we anticipate any increase load into Arlington?
Not currently.
Not currently.
And then the capital costs are shared based on the service agreement we have with Arlington.
So there's enough room for development that is likely to occur in that part of the watershed.
If it was necessary from the city standpoint. The city is a partner in reviewing. It's not AlexRenew only. You know, the agreement comes into both the city's legal team as well as our legal team for review.
There aren't a lot of development parcels left in the corner. The biggest one is the corner. Lower Garden Seminary. It's the developer's been going to develop for.
You have a new high school that's gonna fall into there.
Oh, that's
Yeah, that's on that side.
high school.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, the one in Braddock Road. And
It's not in that area.
Really?
This is all over. Read it, if I remember right, it's all
It's
over.
to the, yeah,
It's to the Mark Center side of 395. It's basically from Seminary down the hill. The Mark Center, because of concerns with capacity, we had to pump over the
I
hill.
realize that, but I know the folks up who live in Marlboro area, Marlboro Place. They've complained, well, they were raising issues about why should we be paying into AlexRenew? Because their stuff goes into Arlington. Of course, there's an answer to that. So that's on the same slope.
I didn't realize, I thought that.
But anyhow, you factored it in any case.
I think, Mr. Jinks, to answer your question too, we're paying for the proportionate flows to that plant. So we only pay for what we're sending them on an annual basis. On a quarterly basis, we do a true up and calculation with Arlington County to justify the flows that are sent.
And do we do that through the water billing or do we actually measure what
We have meters.
we meter? Okay.
It's a mixture of meters and water billing.
And the capital cost fixed, or are they also variable based items?
The capital costs are a little more complicated. I have to get back to you on the details of that. And then the last agreement that was updated most recently was our agreement with the city of Alexandria. That was updated in 2018 as a part of the transfer of the outfalls from the city to AlexRenew. The 21.6 represents the 40% portion of plant capacity. And in Alexandria for billing, we get our billing through our customers through two charges, volumetric charge and a base charge. In our bill, which will also show later, there is a city charge for the sanitary sewer fee. I want to talk a little bit about our AAA credit rating. Back in 2020, AlexRenew received a AAA credit rating from S&P, and it was really part of us securing our loan through WIFIA, through the EPA program. And AAA was through S&P and not through Moody's, and we just wanted to show how we stand with respect to the different ratings between Moody's and S&P. We're going to talk a little bit about this in the next slide, but the AAA rating does require greater metrics than we currently have outlined in our board policy as well as in the master indenture trust. So we have higher metrics for things like reserves and debt coverage. And when we look at that, what we put together for tonight to give you a financial health of the organization over the last essentially 20 years is we put together 3 main slides here. In the top, what we're showing is our wastewater bill starting in 2003, going through 2005 when Mr. Bovary and Mr. Ori, joined the organization to support us, all the way through 2022. And over the course of that time, we put a trend line to that. On average, rates increased about 6.2% year over year on average since 2003. I want to note 2 important areas.
Keep going.
Yes, Mr.
Keep going.
2 important areas across this graph on the top. In 2010, AlexRenew started the state-of-the-art nitrogen upgrade program, which includes the BRBs to meet lower nitrogen limits for the Chesapeake Bay. You can see an increase, a sharper increase in bills during that time. And then on the far right, from 2019 to 2022, you can see the effect of AlexRenew on the customer bill. So looking at 2003, around $15 a month. That excludes the city's sanitary sewer charge. Up to today, we're around that $50 a month wastewater bill. The other piece to note where you see the dip in the billing, that's when AlexRenew eliminated the account charge and also went to monthly billing.
What are the assumptions about average usage? Is it 4,000 gallons a month?
Correct. On the bottom 2 graphs, we're showing our debt service coverage on the bottom left, starting in 2003, going through 2022. And in there, you can see we've got three separate lines. We talked a little bit about AlexRenew's AAA rating. S&P requires a AAA rating minimum of 1.6 times. Our financial policy from 2011 through 2014 was 1.4. It got bumped up to 1.5 in 2014, 2015. And then our master indenture trust minimum is the bottom line at 1.1 coverage. On the right, we show our minimum reserves starting in 2003 to 2022. You can see they increased significantly since then. And then you can also see the 3 lines where we outlined S&P. AAA minimum is 150 days, our financial policy 120, and then our trust indenture of 60. It's important to note that these numbers also do include our investments that you see in the area graph.
Does S&P review the rating and reaffirm it every year? Once they get all the data from us?
I believe it was covered in the audit, or are we submitting annually?
I think there's Rob Ori. I think he may have to submit secondary disclosure information every year. I think they review every 2 years, if I remember right. I'm not sure if they reviewed recently, because we just went through WIFIA about a year or so ago, 2 years ago.
It's coming for review.
It's probably coming for review soon, would be my guess. No, in S&P. Guys. You have not been notified of a review. Okay.
We'll look into that and make sure we address it at the next meeting. So we have our major policies and our trust indenture, but we also have fiscal principles that really guide the rate setting process that were established with the AlexRenew Board of Directors. I'm going to walk through each of these. We want to operate a fiscally stable and sustainable utility. We want to fully recover our costs through rates. we want to provide transparent and timely reporting, and what that means is we are transparent to the public and also informing the public of potential increases or rate adjustments on an annual basis, going through the public process and getting feedback throughout the process. We allow flexibility to assist those that need it in making their monthly payments. And then, of course, we have to comply with both the trust indenture as well as our financial policy. So these are sort of the guiding principles that we talk about on a year-over-year basis as we enter our budget planning process.
When we allow payment flexibility, that of course does not include subsidizing.
Correct. It's a flexible payment plan type
And
approach.
when we make a flexible payment, do we have a charge on that? Do we impose an additional charge for, like we do with a credit card?
I don't believe we do.
No, we don't.
We do not.
I mean, I pay minimum on my credit card,
Right. This is just a payment plan to help them pay off an outstanding debt.
but we're not charging them.
So jumping back to 2019, after we assumed responsibility of the River Renew program, we had to make some decisions on how we were going to equitably set rates. And we looked at three options primarily to the rate setting process. On the left-hand side of this slide is an example bill based on 4,000 gallons. And really we showed this here to talk about the wastewater treatment charge, which is your flow-based charge, your base charge, which is a fixed charge, the city's charge, and that gives you total current charges on a monthly basis. We looked at a few main ways to recover costs from River Renew. Option one was to try and recover the costs solely through the base charge. And we talked a little bit about customer base on the left-hand side of this slide. When we looked at that, we saw a disproportionate impact to our small commercial buildings that use low volumes. Those are your multifamily units with a master meter that are smaller in scale than the building across the street or a larger commercial residential building. Option two looked at recovering charges through the flow charge, which is the top number on the bill. And there we also saw that there was a disproportionate impact to our larger users with the high volume users just through commercial, as well as the large commercial high volume users. So size of building and just high volume users for the other commercial side. Where we
Question on the base charge, what's, briefly, because it's probably complicated, what's the basis of how it's determined?
So I don't know, Terry, do you wanna field that?
Yeah, so when we examined the rate structure, I think the last time was when we were first establishing the base rate. We examined what the fixed cost of the system was at that time. We identified probably more fixed costs than what we could recover. And so we established it to try to ramp up the fixed cost recovery over time. This was years ago. It's an identification of what the fixed costs are, and it was also a consideration of, ensuring that we didn't have too high of a fixed charge, since there were considerations about affordability, I believe, as well. Rob, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, we did check, we did it, some of the fixed costs we're looking at was the Santa program, and with those incremental fixed costs associated with that and debt financing. And so, okay, that is a certain amount of value. And back then, we had really no base charge. In fact, Fairfax even started issuing, implementing a fixed cost recovery as well. And we wanted to do that for a couple reasons. One is it's fair, because those that don't use, you have to have your system there ready to serve 24/7. You provide a 24/7 service, and so we wanted to make, and it promotes revenue stability. Those base charges come every month, whether it's zero flow or 100 gallons of flow. We still get those base charges, and that also helped as we went to the rate agencies. They really like stable revenues. And so that was a lot of the reasons why we did that. So we looked at those costs and we ramped it up to about 25%. That's about where the industry is, about 25% of your fixed costs being recovered in a base charge. The amount of fixed costs of the system, as you can imagine, are a lot higher than that. The pure variable cost, power, chemicals, is minor compared to the infrastructure costs. So we kind of have a blend there to get to, we think, a pretty good industry level.
So for customers that aren't residential customers, their base charge then is greater?
Yes.
Sounds to me like a little bit, I'll say artificial. In a
Well, we
sense,
did
it's,
look-
picking a
No,
number, it's not based
What
on.
we did is we looked at the demand, the flow relationships for the max month of all those customers. And one thing that you did, I saw you look at, I was thinking, you were thinking about the commercial and the condominium. A lot of utilities put those customer classes together as commercial, and we have to rely on American Water. They provide us that data, and they don't have a multifamily class, they have a commercial class. But we did look at the maximum month relationships among all your customers. We got all 24,000 residential and whatnot, looked at that, and that's how we got the relationships between them. Then we also looked at, we looked at the meter size, also serving those customers, and said, as you can think, if you're served by a 5/8 inch meter, you probably have a lower demand. You have the smallest meter out there, water meter. If I have a 6-inch meter, high likelihood I have a higher demand on the system, more flow. I'm the condo, you're the real estate office. And so we ratioed the base charge. Once we established what the dollar value was to recover, we ratioed it based on the instantaneous demands for those meters as published in the American Water Works Association manuals, and which is used by utilities all across the state in setting base charges. So they do ramp up by the size of the customer.
So in one case, then the amount assigned to that category of revenue is based on usage, and then you go within each class and look at other factors.
Yes, sir.
And divide the revenue you want to capture from that particular user class by those, however you weight factors, like meter size.
That's representative, exactly right.
And we will have further details showing the spread of meter size at our budget meeting in March, both the budget and the finance and audit committee. Something we show, I'm sure you saw in some of the other materials we provided you. Saw a breakdown of this table of the meter size based on our customer class.
Now, if you have a customer, we have a customer who uses water, well, let's say, Port City Brewery. They're consuming water, they're not turning it back into the wastewater stream. Do we have a sort of a meter adjustment? Is that, Virginia Americas?
Yeah, if it's big enough, there'd be a deduct meter, but also, we also have the winter average piece as well, for somebody who might want to, have higher usage during the summer. It's the same thing as water.
I mean,
Winter
if-
average.
Yeah.
There'd be a deduct meter added for somebody like that.
Pretty similar beer in the summertime.
Good,
I'm
man.
sure they use a
Well,
bottle
primarily,
of,
I imagine,
that's not returned
they
to the
did have a
system.
separate line for the brewery.
So for the average customer, we
You'll go
should
into
have
the
the winter average.
manufacturer, because there's a lot of water.
Mr. Carl, by the way,
It
this
could be either one.
is a great presentation. You're presenting a lot of very dense historical information very well. So thank you and your team for this. The table on the right part of the slide, the recovery, that's really what this is about, right? This is the recovery. We ultimately, as I remember, we chose option 3. Correct. For reasons of fairness, right, which is part of our principles. What's the period here? Is it from 2019 to 2026? Is that that's the period?
For the
Coverage recovery. I'm sorry, the recovery.
for
For the River
It
Renew
was the
implementation
program.
period, the program.
It was a program, about 5 years.
2026.
So essentially 19 to 26.
End of 2025,
give or take.
yep,
The
correct.
whole price of the program.
Correct. And as you can see in option 3, when we looked at recovering costs through both the flow charge or the wastewater treatment charge and the base charge, it was more equitable across all of our customer classes.
My memory of this discussion back in 2019 when we had this discussion. It was option 3, and the fairness aspect of option 3 is what really drove us towards the size of the base fee and the size of the volumetric.
That's correct.
Isn't that correct?
Yeah, you looked at it and it was, everybody was charged for renew equally based on what they were prior to renew. You pay the same percentage, I paid the same percentage. You're that 5/8 inch customer, I'm that 6 inch customer again. We paid all in proportion to our demands as a system benefit, and everybody paid equally in percentage.
We adjusted the fees to create
Yes.
this equity.
Yes, that was the decision made by the board.
One of your discoveries.
Maybe it could have his too.
The important thing to note is when we looking at AlexRenew, one of the big concerns was, rate shock, rate impact to our customers. And this is one approach, one tool that we had in the toolbox to create some more predictability around our rate increases. The next piece is on the next slide, if there's not any further questions on this slide. So back in 2019, we also looked at 2 different ways to implement rate increases in it. It's a little easier to see up here, but the light gray area, that's our capital spend for AlexRenew. Those bars, year over year, 2018 through, we'll call it 2025, 2026, and 2025. We looked at really 2 different ways to structure our rates. On the right was a gradual increase in the beginning, not to have an initial rate impact right out of the gate, and then build up cash later and meet the spend of the program, which we're at now. We're at the kind of the midpoint of construction on the program. So ramp up and have a steeper curve later, but defer rate increases up front. That was one option that we looked at. The other option was to have consistent rate increases year over year and to develop some cash on the early end so that we're able to support the spend of AlexRenew as we went through the construction phase of the program, because that's the majority of our spend out of 615 is 454.4, which we're spending, $120, $160 million a year right now. We ended up selecting the first option on the left of consistency. And again, that goes back to us having predictability around rates year over year, our customer having predictability around the rates year after year. In addition to that, we also looked at the duration of how to structure our rate increases for the program. And we landed on a 2-year rate adjustment. So every 2 fiscal years, we're looking at rates. What that allowed us to do is, remember when we took over the program, we're on an incredible timeline to get this program done. We had a cone of uncertainty for the capital costs of the program. One of the first ones was 370 to 555. That changed as we went through design and defined the design better to understand what the costs were going to be. By doing those 2-year rate increases, we could kind of flex year over year to be able to evolve as conditions on the project evolve. That gave us more certainty in our CAP funding and could adjust for those spending peaks associated with the AlexRenew program, primarily the tunnel project. And it also promoted stability and predictability for our customers year after year. So what that ended up looking like to date, so we've had 2 rate adjustments to date to support AlexRenew. These are fiscal years, and if you remember, we also changed our fiscal year in 2018 or 2019?
2019.
2019. The first rate increase was fiscal year 2020. All of these are based on 4,000 gallons. So first was in 2020. 12.7% was our first rate increase to support the program, and month over month, around $5 a month on the bill. In 2021, we had initially proposed 11.4% rate increase. Due to the COVID pandemic, we made a decision with the board to reduce that rate increase from 11.4 down to 6.6%, and that resulted in around $3 per month adder to the bill. And then our last rate adjustment was in 2022, 6.9 and 6.5%, which equate to about $3 on the bill. And what that looks like year over year, looking at 2019 through 2023, and we did include the city's charge in here as well, which is around $9 a month, in addition to the AlexRenew charges. You can see we started out in 2016 around $46 per month, and we've slowly increased rates year over year, somewhere where we've had $3 to $4 of increase per month. And that, one of the structures, we had a very predictable rate increase year over year, the way, based on the policies and the approach that we adopted back in 2019. And you can see how that's played out up through 2023. And that's something we plan to continue to do, looking out into the last two rate increases necessary on the paper. With this program also came a considerable amount of debt. As you all know, we are financing the job primarily through WIFIA and Virginia Clean Water Revolve Fund loans, with the exception of $140 million of state grants that have been received to date. The debt, what we're showing in this graph, is debt starting in 2016 before the Revenue program started, going all the way through 2060. And what you see is in light blue was our original debt that was tailing off, and that debt was a result of two major programs, same as I mentioned before, and some additional nitrogen programs that started around 2005. So one of the reasons we're able to take on AlexRenew and assume additional debt is because we were trending downward in debt that we had from past projects. And you kind of see that that sweet spot where we then started incurring more debt for AlexRenew, shown in dark blue, that extends all the way through 2060. We'll be taking a closer look at this as we revisit our spending and our budget planning for this year at probably the board meeting and the Finance and Audit Committee meeting in March, and talking about a couple different scenarios that we're looking at with our grant funding, the $90 million grant that we are waiting to come through ARPA and the state.
So we've gotten 140 already.
We've gotten 50. We've requisitioned for an additional 90 through DEQ, and they're working with the Treasury now to pull those funds to start our draw on the ARPA. Okay. We have not gotten that yet. We just sent in the final application last week to the state.
So is there any other hope for anything more?
We're not seeking any funds this year through the General Assembly. Okay. We'll see how things go next term. But the ARP was if you read some of the language, was a last and final, but that doesn't mean we can't go back and ask for more if it's needed.
What's the term of the WIFIA loan? 30 years?
One's 45 and one's 30. Do you remember which is which? I think WIFIA is 45.
No, I don't believe so. I think it caps out around 35.
35. And then Clean Water is 30.
Clean Water's 30. I'll confirm it.
Is the amortization level debt service principal or some combination?
You can see it on the screen, the structure. The blue is the combination of the WIFIA and the Clean Water Revolving.
They're both level debt.
And it's kind of wrapped around the existing debt, I think, a little bit. The way you see that, how the total debt service is fairly level, approaching 25 million, and then leveling out.
So when we come back in March, we'll show this, and Mr. Jenkinson, I know the board has seen this before, where we had the dark blue colored showing both the clean water debt and the WIFIA debt. We'll make sure that that's nuance is clear at the next meeting. typically every single year, year over year, since we've been involved with implementing AlexRenew, we've also showed our rates as AlexRenew, which include the city charges to our local peers, as well as other CSO communities. So this is the first slide, assume for AlexRenew, it's the second from the bottom. You can see the survey average is around $55 a month. That includes DC Water, Falls Church, Fairfax, WSSC, Arlington, Prince William. You can kind of see where we fall with respect to our regional peers. It is important to note that the only other regional peer implementing a program of the magnitude that we are with AlexRenew is DC Water, is implementing a massive $2.6 billion CSO program. Ours, again, $615 million. So that's the only other CSO community on this specific list.
Mr. Carl, the city charge, right? We always highlight that particular element of total expense. Now, I assume on the other cities here, DC, Fairfax, Falls Church, the cost of the collection network is embedded in their gray bars, is that correct?
So those other entities own their collection system.
They own their collection
Correct.
system.
So that would be embedded into the gray bar.
And that's fine. So really comparing apples to apples, let's not just look at the gray part, look at the total bar there.
That's amazing. I mean, we have AlexRenew, so we know what the driver is there. And I look at these other communities and what's driving that.
Yeah, but strongly false church, that seems.
Aging infrastructure. Aging infrastructure is driving the rates.
Sorry?
Aging infrastructure, capital improvement program.
Also older area of Fairfax.
So a lot of collection.
Over 3,500 miles.
Oh, really?
So we also compared ourselves nationally to other combined sewer communities. Also to note that this is, Mr. Dickinson, this is our fiscal year 2023, so our current year. Rates that we're showing that $59 a month that I showed you in the previous slide. We also compare ourselves nationally to other CSO communities. And some of those CSO communities have different phases of implementation around their CSO programs. Richmond started their CSO program, for example, back in the 90s and 2000s. Atlanta has, been doing theirs since the early 2000s. Boston's been done since the 90s. So when you look at our rates across the board with the other CSO communities, you can see how we trend as well, looking also in-state at Richmond and Lynchburg.
It's fascinating.
That does not yet represent, for example, Richmond. Must undertake an additional long-term control plan to get CSOs out of the James, nor our projected spend into the future years of AlexRenew.
But Richmond would have collection lines as well as their CSO.
City DPU.
So that does, we don't have that many collection lines, we have electronics.
Which is, we have our, AlexRenew has our interceptors, which are covered in our gray area, and then Aaron and the city have their smaller collector lines, which are covered in white. Trying to see if you're still digesting that slide, if you've moved on to the last one.
And again, Mr. Carl and team, this is an incredibly efficient and effective presentation of data.
I think looking ahead for next steps for our FY 2024 budget, as well as our FY 2024 rate adjustment, we're here tonight the 21st. Staff's currently working on the draft budget book, as well as the draft presentation to bring to the March 21st board meeting, where we'll present that preliminary budget. and rate proposal, where you'll see the output from the rate model based on our revised capital improvement program. The following week, on March 27th, we'll get together again with the Finance and Audit Committee to go through that document in further detail and answer any additional questions regarding the budget. In April, at the April board meeting, we'll be looking to adopt that draft budget and also approve our resolution for a public hearing. At that point, we're able to go out and do public notice through the Gazette. If we need an additional Finance and Audit Committee meeting in between April and June, we have it tentatively scheduled for May. And in May, we'll also do an additional posting in the Gazette and get ready for our public hearing on May 20th.
Couple questions. In a previous board meeting, we did briefly discuss the idea of revisiting the minimum monthly bill, right? Because if your water usage, if you're a ratepayer, if your water usage is below a certain level, you still pay as if you used 3,000 gallons per
I got the threshold we set, was it 3?
I believe it's 4,000.
Was it 4?
It was 4, I don't know if we,
Originally, on a quarterly basis, it was 3, and then when we went to monthly billing, I believe we switched to 4
Based on the billing data.
based on the billing data. And that, and the important distinction there is this is a billing cap threshold. So this is not a minimum charge that we're charging. It's just to say that if customers, their sewer billing cap for the period of time outside of the winter quarter period, falls below 4,000 gallons, that we would still charge them a variable rate for that use, because you could have customers that are during that winter quarter period may not occupy the residence or whatnot, and so it ensures that we can collect from those customers. When we look at the billing data that we charge versus capping the bill, so for example, if we were to not have this minimum threshold, then whatever your winter quarter use would be, that would be the cap for your bill for all the remaining quarters of the year. So if you had winter quarter use of 1,000 gallons in that period, then every other bill would be capped at 1,000 gallons for the remainder. So that's why this policy was established, so that we wouldn't have bills that would be capped artificially low in theory, and provide more equity to all the ratepayers, that we wouldn't have other customers that were essentially paying for the customers that had their bills artificially capped because maybe during that winter quarter they had a low use.
Terry, let's drill down this with 2 examples, okay? Let's pretend I go to Florida every winter, as everybody should, right? And don't use any water, use very little.
Say you 0.
Okay, and I come back in the spring and summer and fall and consume 4,000 a month.
You would only be paying the base charge, because your variable use in Rob's example would be 0, so your winter quarter use could be set at 0, for example, and so that's why there's this minimum threshold.
So when he comes back, he's paying up to 4,000 gallons.
Well, under the current
Yeah,
policy,
let's talk about the current policy.
under the current policy, you would not be paying more than 4,000 gallons in any month. Any month. It's 4,000 gallons per month. So you would not. So, but your bill would always be based on your metered water demand. So, for example, if you use 6,000 gallons under the current rate structure, and you had 0 use during the winter quarter under the current rate structure, your bill would be capped at 4,000 gallons.
But if you use 1,000, what would it be?
you would only be billed 1,000. So,
Right.
you know, but
It's
there
a
are.
cap, it's a cap measure.
Yeah, it's just a method to try to be as equitable as possible, such that, you know, we don't artificially cap customers' bills below what their threshold is, and because the threshold's based on the winter quarter use.
We don't have to illuminate this now.
Yeah, and
But
there,
in your committee, perhaps we could have a couple scenarios like that. You know, a snowbird who leaves Alexandria in the winter, and comes back and uses an average amount of water. What is it under the current policy? Because I want to make sure we're creating a rate structure that does encourage water conservation. Even though we're a water-rich community, maybe we won't be forever, right? Just a thought. I mean, this is a hard thing to consider, right? Because there are a lot of things we're trying to cover.
and just a few more, just two other points. One is it only applies to your residential customer class. That's single family. All other customers are billed for their metered water use. And the other is that when we have an opportunity to come back to present more information about this, you'll find that there isn't a significant amount of flow that gets captured under this policy. I think that, you know, when we present it, we provide some examples, and we have all the, you know, we know what the water use is, and we know what the cap is, and so we can explain what the difference is between what is billed and what's actually metered, and you're gonna find that it's not as significant as you might think.
Yeah.
And that, you know, this is a policy that was designed originally just to provide some more equity to the residential ratepayers, because, you know, the billing cap concept is that, you know, we understand that there could be irrigation or, you know, outdoor use that doesn't get returned to the wastewater system, and so we want to provide a billing cap for the single family class for that reason.
You know, the flip side of that is that you eliminated the winter cap, but for residential users that use water all year round and irrigate even just a little bit in the summertime, they're gonna be penalized for that.
That's good.
They're gonna be paying more.
If you're, so in the example, you're suggesting that they're using a lot during their winter quarter?
No, they're using a lot during the summer.
they-
But if you use it,
Oh, if they're using a lot of water in the summer but not in the winter quarter, then they would benefit from the sewer billing cap.
Using a lot.
yeah, and if you eliminated it,
But if you eliminated the sewer billing cap, then it could act as a conservation mechanism, but you know, we typically don't see, you know, the sewer bill used as a water conservation tool all the time, but it can be.
No, the only reason I bring it up, we did have a very small number of ratepayers bring this to our attention. Yes. In fact, small number meaning, I think one or two.
Well,
One, okay.
Right.
There's no doubt that if I use 1,000 gallons, I'm gonna be kind of blunt with you, sorry. But if I use 1,000 gallons in the winter, and I come and I water my garden in the summer, and I use 2,000 gallons. And it's less than that 4,000, because 4,000 gallons is the minimum cap, then yes, you're right, that 1,000 gallons that was went on the garden is probably being charged a sewer charge. If you think about all the customers you have and how few that affects, because no rate is perfect, unless you have individual rates for each person, right? I mean, really, it's hard to capture everything. I believe the cap works. I think it's fair. It does allow for those that have high water use in summer periods versus winter periods not to pay sewer. That's what it's designed to do. It also designed to give staff guidance and the ratepayers guidance. If you're zero use for a quarter, well, what do we do if you're zero use? You're getting free sewer. If you didn't have a base charge, you were getting free sewer.
No.
That's the reason why we wanted the base charge. And so that's not fair either. And so it provides guidance and equitability and reasonableness. And I think it's a good policy personally.
No, Rob, I absolutely think the current structure is is really the best
Yeah,
arrangement
I think so,
that balances all the
Right.
different considerations we have to worry about.
exactly.
But I just think for
But-
due diligence and for self-awareness,
Yeah, no, I think it should be
we should
reevaluated.
just take a look at
It
what does
definitely
this
should.
mean for the person who has very low usage in winter,
Right.
comes back and uses an average amount. And by the way, numbers matter. If in fact we have 5 ratepayers in this situation, we're not
Right.
gonna change our rate structure.
You use 6 wells, that's the same as the hill. If there's 10,000 of these, we definitely need to look at something. If there's 3 of them, is it fair? And we should try to find that data, bring that back to you and let you look at that and help you make the policy decision, what you think is fair from your board perspective.
Chair, that we need examples. I'd also like to see this policy in writing.
Okay.
Assume it's in writing somewhere, how it works.
think it's in the
somebody had to go
resolution.
Program it to make it work, so that in effect, you know, like,
Mr. Jinks, I think it's in your
couldn't
rate
repeat it.
rules, pal. I'm
you
sorry.
asked me to right now. But I need to understand it, more nuances, and particularly as a new board member who's not been through what you guys have been through.
We'll do that.
It should be in policy. And again, I think the current arrangement is a good one, but let's just make sure we all know it.
We'll bring that back.
And it is described in the rates, rules and regulations.
I think it is.
We have copies of that.
It's in the rate handbook.
Yes, I think it should be.
It is.
That's good, we'll bring that back.
Alright. Any additional questions?
Again, Mr. Carl and team, it's great to have these kind of presentations without huge Excel spreadsheets. I have to thank you for that.
We'll bring those later.
Speak for yourself, I do it.
I know you do. Okay, thank you. Let's move right on to item B of new business and a board policy on pre-qualification for construction projects. Mr. Carl, I believe you're at that again.
So tab 2 of the board packet, you'll see a memo. As well as attached to that memo is a pre-qualification policy for select construction contracts. I think, backing up, some of the board members have seen how we procured AlexRenew through a 2-step process that included the evaluation of qualifications, and then also based on those qualifications, developing a short list and then evaluation, based on price. For day-to-day design, bid, build type construction projects, we wanted to look at adding an additional tool to our toolbox for procurement of complex work. Looking ahead at our facility, we have projects where we have to upgrade the preliminary and primary systems at our wastewater plant, where we're managing active flow through the headworks of the plant and replacing the equipment we need to clean water 24/7. On the back end of the plant, in our CIP, we're looking at upgrading our solids process, investing in our solids process through a solids master plan that will result in design and construction. So in select projects, we are looking at a procurement tool to be able to review qualifications, previous experience on similar type of work, and then through that, developing a pre-qualification list for contractors that we would then solicit low bids from. So it would be a 2-step process for some specific projects at the organization, where we're getting first step, pre-qual, second step, low bid, as opposed to just going out in traditional design bid build, where you put a contract out, you get a low bid contractor. That can work for a large majority of projects, but where we have specialized work, we wanted to look at having an additional tool in our procurement toolbox that's supported by the Virginia Public Procurement Act regulations. This policy was drafted by council in accordance with VPPA. It's very similar for authorities to have this type of an approach. I know, Mr. Jinks, with the city, you had a pre-qualification process in your code, is the ability to do a pre-qualification. Other wastewater agencies also have this type of a process for not necessarily every job, but specific projects that we deem it's necessary.
That's the question. Where do you make the cut as to complexity, price?
I think we typically would look at risk and risk to the organization or risk to the process. And I gave two examples. You know, we might not do it for a roof project. If we're replacing a roof, that would be typically a low bid project. It's pretty straightforward. But when we're talking about working around active flow, active facilities that we have to make sure are in operation while we replace certain components around it, like preliminary and primary upgrades, that would be a project that we would decide to potentially look at pre-qualification. It's the complexity issue of the project and where we want to be able to have somebody that has specialized experience in doing that type of work. So think about more specialty type contracts.
My concern is with the RFP process, I mean, you always want, you want to create competition. That's a good thing. And also firms that need a leg up, give them a chance. And you don't want to blot them out completely. So I take it this would be something you would use rarely.
So over the next 10 years, I could think of two projects off the bat that we would use it for in the next 10 years. And we obviously have more projects than that in our capital improvement program. But it doesn't limit competition. The point of a pre-qualification process is not limit competition. It complies with VPPA for competition. You just first getting qualifications to develop a pre-qualification list to issue for low bid. So there's a.
I was thinking the contractor who had the blue line out in Maryland, they got caught up in a craziness and they had to quit. And under this, that would be, you wouldn't allow them to come in.
Did you say purple line?
Is it the purple line, the rapid transit?
Purple line, that's correct.
Yeah, it's a P3 project. It's a little different, and one of our contractors was on that job. They weren't precluded from bidding on. Okay, AlexRenew trailer was on that job. It's looking at, I guess, Mr. Dickinson, a better way to put it, it's looking at previous project experience from, do they have the specialty experience to be able to work on this piece of equipment? And have they worked on this type of equipment before? And it could include, references from other projects as well.
Because you have a whole list in there of people who cannot play.
You could get a low bid from a contractor that's not qualified to do the work, and that's where we look
No,
at
but
the
I mean,
risk.
as far as
Substantial non-compliance is that.
difficulties with
Yep.
their client, things like that, I could see where a contractor who worked out there on that line. And also, how do you find out whether or not they have had these difficulties in the past?
There's usually a disclosure that you would ask for in that first step. Just like we did for the design build project, we asked for those disclosures through the front end of the RFQ process for us. We would ask similar questions to disclose and fill out a form.
So the burden's on them, you don't have to do the due diligence.
Correct.
You may want to check on things,
Correct.
but the burden's on them.
Correct.
Any more questions? Mr. Carl, a couple questions for you. Frankly, pre-qual list is the only way you can get things done in a timely fashion. It's been my experience in contract. If you had to guess now, how many firms do you think would ultimately end up on the pre-qual list initially? Can you guess?
It would depend on the project. It'd be project specific. So I couldn't just guess without having a specific project to look at, but.
Correct, and in fact, if 50 firms apply or all 50 pre-qualifications, then 50 would be on the list, so
That's
it's not, the intent is not to winnow down to a smaller number, like sometimes you have a two-step procurement process, where you want to get down to your top 3 and then ask for best and final. In this case, it's wide open as to the number of people who can meet these qualifications. It can be a few, it can be a lot.
questions from the board? Is there a motion to approve this as presented? By Mr. Beal, second by Mr. Jenks. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to the annual Ellen Pickering Award. Now, we've all worked on this. Many of us have worked on this. It's familiar. Mr. Carr, could you just walk through when the critical activity for this award occurs for the board? I know we've got board members who may not be around in April. I just want to make sure we could get the timing right.
So the applications open today. Yep. They'll close on March 17th. And then AlexRenew representative will be joining a selection committee of somebody from the Pickering family and also somebody from the EPC, Environmental Policy Commission with the city.
So that date has,
They have not solidified the date yet, right?
No, Mr. Beal, you did this last year, it'll be a virtual meeting for those three members, probably after the 17th, so sometime between the 17th and kind of early April. And then the date for the actual award hasn't been selected. It's gonna be one of the city's environmental or Earth Day events.
It's usually Earth
Close
Day.
to Earth Day.
But the virtual meeting will be, it'll be based on everybody's availability for who participates.
Sometime between mid-March and early April.
March, first week of April.
and how many applications did you get last year?
Okay, 5 or 6.
Yeah, it was
Like 5.
a half dozen.
Yeah.
And how are you marketing the award this year?
We'll put a press release out, this week, advertise it on AlexRenew.com. We'll also be doing social posts, things like that.
City put out.
City also did.
It went out. Next, will you be around?
I will not be here after the 29th of March.
Of March, so that's 20. Okay, so you might be out and running.
Yeah,
Bill?
Yeah.
You haven't done it in a while.
well, it's been a while. It was my first assignment, I think. Shows how long I've been here.
So you bring a depth of experience to the
Right.
job. So, let the record show that Mr. Dickinson has willingly volunteered for the assignment.
Based upon prior experience.
Who brings a wealth of experience to the job. Great. Okay, Mr. Carl, you're at bat again. Monthly outcomes. Anything you want to highlight in the monthly outcomes?
Yeah, a few things. We added on tab 4 in the CO board report. Wanted to note that we did add a paragraph under finance to review how the LIWAP program has been unfolding here in Alexandria. Just a reminder that the low-income household water assistance program, or LIWAP, is a federally funded program that's implemented through the state. It started in October of last year and will last either until the funds are exhausted or September 1st of 2023. There are some criteria around customers eligible for LIWAP. In the state, $8 million's been distributed to date out of the $16 million that was available. And in Alexandria, about 33,000, based on tonight's number. The value in the report is from last week when you guys got the packet. About 33,000 has been distributed in Alexandria as of this evening to about 45 customers.
About 45 customers.
And that's being done through, if you remember, Promise Pay. It's through the Promise Network, implementing the outreach.
So again, when do we run out of money? Have we already?
There's there's $8 million left in LIWAP and it's first come, first served.
Oh, okay, so
So some
statewide.
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 Yep.
So we have to compete for it.
Customers. The customers do. The customers that would have to apply.
And then when I take a look at the number of accounts that are delinquent, this is just very small percentage of that.
We're trying to do our part to bring more knowledge to the LIWAP program. We'll have a bill stuffer going out next month in our bills. We'll also have a digital bill advertisement as well, both in English and Spanish, going out next month in our bill to bring some more knowledge to the program. The other piece that we wanted to discuss from the monthly outcomes report is, at the previous meeting, there was discussion around delinquencies. Mr. Dickinson, you just brought those up. So with respect to delinquencies, we have not yet brought this to the board. It's likely something we're gonna talk about this spring and summer after we get through the rate setting process. We're currently going through a large project to change providers of our customer billing system. Greater Cincinnati Waterworks is getting out of the billing business. So we're currently working with Raftellus and some other consultants to implement a new billing system. We don't yet know if account numbers and things like that are going to change. It's early days on the project right now. But it's likely that we won't be issuing any shut-off notices until after we transition over to the new billing system, because we do not want to get those customers lost in that transition. In lieu of sending out shut-off notices, as was discussed in the minutes and captured in the minutes of last meeting, what we're looking to do is to start promoting our customer assistance program this spring, and then start the shut-off process once we transition over to the new billing system. So that's a nuance that wasn't captured between last meeting and today.
So as far as the switching, as far as billing, we're talking.
December,
December.
January
And
timeframe.
we're looking for an outside source. We're not gonna,
We're already doing it, yeah,
we're not gonna take it inside.
no, we're using an external provider. Yes, it's not coming in-house.
Maybe envision this is largely an off-the-shelf system.
Is it off the shelf, Matt? Other utilities use it.
It's customizable to a certain extent, but yeah, largely off the shelf.
So those are the two notes I wanted to speak to with respect to the board report document. On AlexRenew, we have a pretty busy February and spring. I do want to call attention to the page 3 of the AlexRenew dashboard. Under Pendleton Street, it says near surface structures, deep foundations under activities. That's our pile driving work. We're anticipating that's gonna start next week. We finished shaft excavation a few weeks ago. We're getting ready to mobilize to use a hydraulic hammer to drive those piles. You have all seen the outreach we've been doing up to this date. We'll continue to perform outreach. Most of the feedback we've gotten to date was around vibrations, not necessarily noise. If there's going to be associated vibrations, that's why we had the slide in our SAG deck at the last meeting showing that's a very small area concentrated to the site.
So it's gonna start next week.
Right.
I drove to 5 years ago.
It'll start next week.
A lot of trucks coming in and out.
The other thing to note at the plant at AlexRenew, we're currently in a downtime with Hazel. She's mined 800 feet. All the trailing gear has been installed. And now we are going through the process to install our vertical conveyor and horizontal conveyor systems to go into full production mining. That's expected to take about 6 weeks. So she should start back up at the end of March or early April with her full production mining. So you'll see the site changing once again in AlexRenew. As you walk by, you'll see what looks like a coal breaker kind of going up next to the shaft. That's our vertical conveyor. Duke Street, two things to note is we're working to get out of the front, what we call the front corner drive aisle at AVR at the Marriott Hotel. That work has to be done by March 9th per agreement with AVR. So we're now working extended hours in that construction staging area to be able to double shift and get the work done by March 9th. It'll be a photo finish if we make it.
That's tight. It's tight, but walking by it.
Yeah, it's just the very front piece, not the whole site, the area right adjacent to the entrance to the hotel. It's that little area in the front corner of the hotel. So we've extended work hours there, and if you've noticed walking by, we've closed the sidewalk. That was to opening and closing the sidewalk on a daily basis caused some inefficiencies in construction. Closing it gives us the ability to just keep going. Two other notes, and they're on page 6 of the dashboard is we have our community listening sessions coming up on March 6th, 7th, and 9th in order of Pendleton Street, Hoofs Run, and Royal Street. At the Hoofs Run, we will be talking a little bit about the Commonwealth Interceptor since we got so many questions last time. We posted up on that site about other work in the area, and we've also invited the city to share a slide of the work happening in Rosemont with respect to their stormwater program. So we expect a representative to the city to be out there with us to discuss work that's happening in Rosemont, because that was a focus of questions we received last time about our river renewal. And then tunnel tours are scheduled for May 6th. We can probably accommodate, I finally got a chance to go into the tunnel. We can probably accommodate about 120 people throughout that day of going down the shaft, walking into the tunnel, taking a look and bringing them back out, photo opportunity, and then back out of the shaft.
Has the invite or the application for attending gone out?
We're getting ready to put it up on our website, and when that happens, we will make sure we notify the board, council board work group, and stakeholder group as our initial release before we take on additional outreach approaches, through email lists and things like that.
Let us know. There's a tremendous amount of interest in that.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a reflection on AlexRenew.
That's good.
That's good.
It's, unfortunately, we're limited. We're a very small tunnel. We can only get about 120 people in. Initially, we were thinking we'd only get 70 or 80 people, but by having people come down the shaft and walk in as opposed to getting on the multi-service vehicle, we can accommodate more people. That's what we're gonna do.
So overall, are you getting many public comments, questions, complaints
About
anything?
our tunnel work,
Yeah.
it's been largely, pretty quiet. Our initial activities, when we put out our mailers about pile driving, we received some questions from residents around Outfall 1. That's why we had developed some of the vibration slides to put in our slide decks. For the most part, no, it's been relatively quiet.
I mean, my feel around town, I'm not hearing anything other than confidence in us, which is nice, but you wonder, wait a second, is that real?
No, we have not.
Okay.
Neither positive nor negative for the most part.
This is good news.
One final question, Mr. Carl, on the update regarding Duke Street, Hoofs Run aspect of the project. Now that you're very far along in that part of the project, have you all encountered any complexities or problems other than short time frame and tight space?
No, I think we have not. We're getting into the phase of the program now. We'll have to start our pump around to maintain flows in Commonwealth Interceptor. So this is a riskier part of the job as we start to put the new pipe in service. But no, we have, what we've anticipated from a site standpoint is what we've experienced today. The biggest challenge is getting washed out after a rain event.
Given what's going on with weather now, warm weather, I'm worried we're gonna have a very
it doesn't help with, schedule, because if you think about it, we're only protected up to about 36 inches, and then, water topping that gate.
I trust you've thought about this, but when you close off Jamison Street, it's amazing the amount of traffic that does come there, coming up west, and you need to leave west open to get into that complex of apartments. And also Shiloh Church, the entrance to their parking lot. And I don't know how you're gonna do that. You're gonna have to say West Street open to just this far?
Correct. Local traffic, and then the road will be closed essentially just at the bridge, right adjacent to the Marriott entrance. And on the other side, keep the public storage entrance open and closed.
What I'm thinking of getting to is to make sure that some of those facilities, there's some childcare places in there in Shiloh, that they know. And we just not rely on our stakeholder group giving them advice. Because they're gonna find it on Sunday, a different twist.
It might be helpful, and you may have this already in your plan ready, to give them a flyer they could email out to the parishioners of Shiloh or parents
Yeah.
of the childcare center, so things don't get lost in the translation, and your best foot forward as far as explaining why this is happening, is something that's out there from day one.
And you're gonna have to make sure it gets to the right person, not just put it in the mail slot.
Yeah, we've been working with both entities
Okay, good.
over the last, 4 years. Some of our coworkers have children at the daycare, so we've done things like backpacks for them and things like that. So we'll make sure that they're getting advance notice for that closure. We did meet with the bike group last week to make them notify them around the bicycle detours as well.
Any other discussion of monthly outcomes? Mr. Carl, I noticed one of the attachments to the handout for today's meeting is the updated homeowner and civic association list. Thank you for that. Now that we're out of COVID, I think we can begin to reconnect with the civic association. Mr. Carl, can I give your team a request or an assignment? In the past, we just sort of randomly assigned board members to go to civic association meetings. I think that was a good thing, but I'm wondering if we could be more strategic. Could you think about where we're going with AlexRenew, where we're going with Riverman, maybe even factor in all the things going on in the city? Think about, have careful thought. Which civic associations probably have the most questions and the most interest and maybe the most concern and maybe anxiety? And where do we want to perhaps engage the board members now that civic associations are meeting again? We have 20 civic associations, but some are not very interested in Riverrenew because it's so far away. For others, Riverrenew is right in the front yard.
And some are more fun.
And then there's Commonwealth Intersection. And
Some people will have very specific concerns about it.
so I would guess there are probably 5 to 7 civic associations that are going to be intensely interested in AlexRenew. I think we can help you and be a little bit of a force multiplier. But give it careful thought.
Mr. Chairman, on
Yes.
that one, I did check at least online, and there are changes.
Yeah.
And all of these civic associations, they turn over as far as leadership and who's in charge. So I'll pass these off to South Department South. And so I have some changes here.
Great. Emerging from COVID, which is great.
So we'll take another look at assignments and put this in info only for the next board meeting as well.
And feel free to just contact board members directly if you have questions and things. I think we should share the activity, Bill, because I know you've got a number of the active ones.
Yeah.
Now we got,
Some are hard to track down, I'll tell you.
anyway, food for thought. Okay, if there is no other business, I would like to make a motion for the board to go into closed session. Pursuant to the relevant legal authorities, counsel, that I don't remember off the top of my head.
2.23711. 3711A subsection 1, items to be discussed, discussion of personnel matter related to employee incentive.
One very brief personnel matter. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. All in favor? Aye. Thank everybody for attending a long board meeting, and congratulations, Mr. Carl, on your first